Hello. Sorry, y'all. This is going to be a long one, but I need to get this off my chest. My name's Brad, 34, and I've been with my wife, Jenny, 35, for 10 years. We've been married since 2018. We were best friends once, had the same taste in music, shows, food, you name it. But lately, I feel like things are slipping. Something between us just ain't right. I used to think it was just a phase, a dry spell like every couple goes through. But over the last few years, we started to drift. The love's still there, but that spark? It feels like it's dying. Jenny barely talks to me anymore. Everything's either, I'm fine, or it's nothing, like she's hiding behind those words. It's like she's constantly keeping her distance. And man, that's starting to mess with me. We've had these moments where we'd make plans to spend time together, but then Jenny would always ditch our plans to hang with friends. Now, she wouldn't leave me out, but she never made time just for us anymore. I'd bring it up, but every time she'd just shrug and say I was overreacting. She'd apologize, but nothing ever changed. I felt like I was losing her, like we weren't on the same team anymore. I tried telling her how I felt, that I missed the romance, the connection, but all I ever got was the same empty apologies. A year went by with no change. I started giving up too, I guess. We became like two strangers sharing a space, just roommates, really. I still loved her, but the only time Jenny would get close, like kiss me or touch me, it was always with some expectation of sex. It got to the point where I didn't even want it anymore. I'd say, I don't feel like it, and I wasn't lying. Who wants to force it when you feel like a ghost in your own marriage? I told her 1,000 times, I just need more from you. I need that emotional connection. But she kept twisting it, saying, you are not attracted to me anymore, which was far from the truth. I still craved her, but what I wanted was deeper than that. Anyway, that's the backstory. Now on to the part where things got real bad. Back in April, I had to head out of state to visit my parents for a few days. We've got this dog, Max, and he's like our kid. So, before I left, I ordered one of those nanny cams to keep an eye on him while I was gone. When the package showed up, Jenny asked me what it was, and I told her, nanny cam for the dog, half joking. She laughed it off, not thinking much of it, but I actually set the thing up in the living room to check on Max while I was away. One night, Jenny went out to a concert with some coworkers. I was not worried about her going out. We both had our own lives, our own friends. What got to me, though, was that she promised she would not be out late. Said she would be home by 11 p.m. at the latest, and I believed her. But as the night dragged on, something felt off. It was pushing 2 a.m. when I finally checked the cam out of pure frustration. I was pissed because Max had been alone for hours by then, and I could not get a hold of Jenny. I texted, called, nothing. At this point, I was fuming. I had this sick feeling in my gut, but I kept telling myself, she's probably just out with the group. It is no big deal. But then I saw her. I watched the screen as she walked into the house, stumbling a bit. She was not alone. Right behind her was a guy from work, some dude I recognized from a few work parties. The second I saw him follow her in, something in my stomach dropped. I tried to tell myself he was just helping her inside because she was drunk, but they sat down on the couch, and I could hear everything. Jenny was slurring her words, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. He was sober, too, so there was no excuse for him being there that late. Then they started talking. At first, it seemed harmless, small talk, the kind of stuff you do to kill awkward silence. But the way their voices changed, I knew what was coming. My heart started racing as I watched. Jenny leaned in closer to him, way too close for just friends. She started giggling, her hand resting on his leg. Then I heard him say it, come on, just one kiss. I froze. My head started spinning, and I could not believe what I was seeing. Before I knew it, she was on top of him, straddling him right there on our couch, in our home. They started kissing, their bodies pressed together, and I just sat there, glued to the screen, in complete disbelief. It felt like someone had kicked the wind out of me. I wanted to scream, to throw the damn laptop across the room, but all I could do was watch. The worst part was, I could not stop them. I was miles away, stuck with nothing but that grainy, damn nanny cam feed. So I did the only thing that came to mind. I called the cops and told them I had an intruder in my house. It felt like the longest few minutes of my life, waiting for the cops to show up. My mind was spinning, and I was still glued to that stupid screen, watching my wife grind on this guy like it was nothing. I kept thinking, how could she do this to me? The woman I had spent 10 years with, built a life with, was sitting there betraying me in the worst way possible. I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped the phone. Finally, flashing lights lit up the window on the camera. I could see them through the blinds, 2 cops walking up to the front door. Jenny jumped up the second she heard the doorbell. I watched as she scrambled off the couch, trying to fix her shirt, looking confused and panicked, probably wondering who the hell would be at the door at this hour. She opened the door, and the police stepped inside. It was surreal, watching the whole thing unfold from miles away. The guy was trying to act all innocent, stuttering something about how he was just dropping her off and they were just talking. Yeah, right. The cops weren't buying it. They separated the 2 of them and started questioning Jenny about why this random man was in our house at 2 in the morning while I was away. The guy was trying to stay cool, but he looked like a deer in headlights. When the officers mentioned the word intruder, Jenny's face turned white as a sheet. I could hear her saying, "No, no, he's a friend." But it was too late. The damage was done. The police had walked in on a scene that did not look good at all, and honestly, part of me was glad. I wanted them to see her for what she had done, for what they both were. Then, one of the cops asked to speak to me. I had called in the report, so they needed confirmation. I answered the phone and explained that I had been out of town, had seen the whole thing on the camera, and that I did not recognize the guy. That was enough to get him out of my house. They told him to leave, and I watched as he slinked out the front door like the coward he was. Jenny stood there in shock, not even knowing how to react. But the craziest part? After the cops left, she called me. Her voice was shaking, trying to play the whole thing off like it was a misunderstanding. She started rambling about how drunk she was, how she had not meant for anything to happen, and how she was just so sorry. But the kicker was when she said, "It was nothing, Brad. You are overreacting." That was the moment something inside me snapped. All those years of feeling ignored, of begging for more from her, of trying to fix what was broken between us. Suddenly, it all made sense. She did not care. She had stopped caring a long time ago, and here I was, the idiot who had been holding on, thinking we could get back to where we were. I realized that the person I thought I knew had been slipping away from me for years, and I had been too blind to see it. But now it was right in front of me. After I hung up the phone, I just sat there in stunned silence. The anger was boiling inside me, but I could not process it all at once. She had the nerve to call me right after being caught red-handed and tell me I was overreacting. Overreacting. Like what I saw with my own eyes somehow was not real. I felt like I was losing my mind. I stayed up all night thinking about it, going over every little detail of the past few years, every argument, every moment where I felt something was off but shrugged it away. It all came rushing back, but now it was clear. Jenny had been pulling away from me for a long time, and I had been in denial. I kept convincing myself that we could fix things, that we just needed more time. But time was not going to fix this. The next morning, she tried calling again. I ignored it. I could not bring myself to listen to more excuses. But she kept texting, sending messages about how she was sorry, how she had made a mistake, how she did not mean for it to go that far. She claimed she had been drunk, and it was just a stupid, impulsive decision. She begged me to come home so we could talk it out face to face. I did not respond. I knew what I was going to say to her the moment I got back, but I needed to figure out how I was going to handle this. I still loved her, that much was true, but love was not enough. Not anymore. 2 days later, I walked through the front door, and there she was, sitting on the couch, the same couch where it all went down. The look on her face was a mix of guilt and fear. She jumped up the second she saw me, rushing over like she could fix everything with a hug. But I stepped back. I was not about to let her off the hook that easy. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. The words came out harsh, and I did not even care. I was done being the guy who just let things slide. Jenny immediately started crying, and for a second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered everything. What I had seen, what she had done. No amount of tears was going to erase that. She kept saying how she was drunk, how she did not mean for it to happen, how it was a mistake. I cut her off. You invited him in, I said, my voice steady but furious. You kissed him. You chose to cheat on me. She tried to explain it away again, blaming the alcohol, saying it was just a moment of weakness. But I was not buying it. You are not a victim here, Jenny, I snapped. You do not get to blame this on being drunk. That was when she dropped the bombshell, the thing that twisted the knife even deeper. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, I did it because you stopped loving me. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Everything I had done, everything I had tried to fix, all of it. And now she was turning it back on me? I stood there, speechless, the weight of her words hitting me harder than I expected. I just stared at her, my mind trying to wrap itself around what she had just said. I stopped loving her? That was her excuse? That was the reason she gave for inviting some guy into our home and betraying me right there on our couch? Are you serious right now? I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. You're trying to tell me that this is my fault? Jenny kept her eyes on me, her tears still falling. But there was something in her expression, something cold. You checked out a long time ago, Brad, she said, almost like she was trying to justify it. You stopped trying. You stopped showing me you cared. I could feel my chest tightening, anger and hurt mixing together in a way I had never felt before. Are you kidding me? I snapped. I've been trying, Jenny. I've been begging you for more, for anything. You shut me out. You ignored me. Don't you dare turn this around on me. She flinched at the sound of my voice rising, but I was too far gone at this point. I had held all of this in for too long, and now it was all coming out. You think I didn't notice how you started avoiding me? How you always had an excuse for why you couldn't spend time with me? You made me feel like I was invisible. Jenny shook her head, wiping away her tears. It wasn't like that, she whispered. I was lonely, Brad. You didn't touch me, didn't look at me like you used to. I could not believe what I was hearing. That's what this is about. You needed attention? You could have talked to me, Jenny. You could have told me how you felt, but instead, you cheated. You went behind my back and brought some guy into our house. She opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't done. And you expect me to just, what? Understand? Forgive you because you were lonely? I've been here this whole time, trying to make this work, trying to fix what's broken. But you? I paused, the words catching in my throat. You didn't even try. Jenny broke down again, sobbing into her hands, but it felt hollow to me now. Her tears weren't enough anymore. Not after what I had seen, not after what she had done. There was a time when I would have felt guilty for making her cry, when I would have comforted her, but now, I was just numb. She sat back down on the couch, curling into herself, her sobs shaking her body. I stood there, watching her, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing her clearly. All the love I had for her, all the memories we shared. It was like they were slipping through my fingers, and no matter how much I had wanted to save us, I knew there was no going back now. I can't do this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. Jenny looked up, her face streaked with tears. What are you saying? She whispered, her voice trembling. I'm saying I'm done, I said, the words finally coming out, heavy and final. I can't forgive you for this. She stared at me like she didn't believe what I was saying. No, Brad, we can work through this. We can go to therapy. We can fix it. No, we can't. My voice was steady now. No more yelling, just the truth. This was the last straw, Jenny. You killed us. Jenny looked at me like she had not heard me right, like she thought if she just cried a little harder, maybe I would take it all back. But I stood there, stone cold, no longer the man who would comfort her through every little thing. No longer the guy who would shoulder all the blame just to keep the peace. You're serious? She asked, her voice shaking. You're really leaving? I'm serious, I replied, more calmly than I expected. You made your choice, Jenny, and now I'm making mine. She stood up from the couch, her face twisted with desperation. But I love you, Brad. I know I messed up, but you can't just throw 10 years away because of one mistake. I clenched my fists, trying to keep myself from losing it again. This wasn't one mistake. This was a betrayal. You betrayed my trust, Jenny. You invited someone else into our home, into our life, and threw everything we had away in one night. And you want me to just forgive that? Her eyes filled with panic, and she rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. Please, Brad, we can fix this. We can go back to the way things were. I swear, I'll do better. I'll be better. I'll show you how much I love you. I pulled my arm away from her grasp, stepping back. There's no going back to the way things were, I said, my voice tight with anger and sorrow. I've been trying to fix this for years, and you didn't care. You didn't listen. You didn't fight for us until it was too late. She collapsed onto the couch again, her face buried in her hands. I stood there, watching her fall apart, and for a moment, I felt something crack inside me. I had loved this woman for so long. We had been through so much together. But now I just felt empty. Like the love I had for her had been drained out of me, leaving nothing but a hollow space where it used to be. I never wanted this, I muttered, almost to myself, but you left me no choice. For a second, I thought maybe she would try to argue again, to fight harder, but all she did was sob. Her voice came out in broken gasps as she cried, I thought you would forgive me. I shook my head, feeling the weight of those words. Forgive her? Maybe I would, one day. But not today. Not now. Not after everything. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. I could hear her calling my name, begging me to stop, but I kept moving. The sound of my footsteps echoed in my head, and I felt like I was walking away from not just her, but from the last decade of my life. Every fight, every laugh, every memory we had shared, it all seemed distant now, like it belonged to someone else. As I reached the door, I hesitated for just a second. Part of me wanted to look back, to see her one last time, to remember what we had before it all fell apart. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool air, closing it behind me with a final, heavy thud. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to process everything. My mind was racing. My emotions were a tangled mess. I didn't know what came next, or where I would go from here. All I knew was that the life I had been living, the life I thought I would have forever, was over, and there was no turning back. I got in the car and just sat there for a while, staring out the windshield. My hands were still shaking, but now that I was out of the house, away from her, I started to feel the weight of everything that had just happened. It hit me hard. This was it. My marriage was over. The woman I had spent a decade of my life with was in that house, crying over what she had done, and I was out here, alone. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white, and took a deep breath. I did not want to feel sorry for myself, not after everything that had gone down. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. But still, there was this ache in my chest that I could not shake. It felt like I was grieving for something that had died, and in a way, I guess I was. I pulled out of the driveway, my mind still buzzing with everything she had said. You stopped loving me. Her words echoed in my head like a bad song stuck on repeat. I kept going over and over in my mind, trying to figure out if she was right. Had I stopped loving her? Had I really given up on us without even realizing it? But no, that wasn't it. I had not stopped loving her. I had stopped loving the person she had become. The Jenny I fell in love with. The woman who laughed at all my dumb jokes, who danced with me in the kitchen, who made me feel like I was her world. That woman was long gone. I had been trying to hold on to a ghost, and in the process, I had lost myself. As I drove through the quiet streets, I started thinking about what came next. Therapy? Divorce? I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to just keep driving, to disappear for a while and let it all settle. But life wasn't that simple. I had responsibilities. I had a house, a job, friends, family. I couldn't just vanish, no matter how much I wanted to. When I got to a red light, I picked up my phone and looked at the messages Jenny had sent earlier. All those apologies, all those promises to do better, they didn't mean anything now. I knew her too well. I knew she was sorry, but I also knew that deep down, she was more sorry that she had gotten caught than anything else. And even if she meant it, even if the damage was done, I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unfeel what I had felt. The light turned green, but I didn't move. I just sat there, the world outside my window moving on like nothing had happened. While I was stuck in this moment, I felt like I was suspended between two lives, the one I had been living and the one that was waiting for me on the other side of all this. I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. Finally, I pressed my foot down on the gas and started driving again, heading toward, I don't even know. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not to her. Not to that house. Not to the life I had thought we were building together. As the miles slipped by, I realized something. In a weird way, I felt free. It was not a happy feeling, not yet, but there was something liberating about knowing that the worst had already happened, that there was nothing left to be afraid of. The hard part was over. Now all I had to do was figure out what came next. I kept driving, no destination in mind, just letting the road take me where it wanted. The quiet hum of the car, the dark streets passing by, everything felt surreal, like I was floating through someone else's life. I could barely remember where I was heading when I saw the familiar neon glow of a diner up ahead. Without thinking, I pulled into the parking lot, killing the engine and sitting in the silence. I needed time to think, to clear my head. The past few hours had felt like a blur, but now, sitting there in the empty parking lot, it started to sink in. My life, the one I had known for so long, was over. I was officially stepping into the unknown, and even though that should have terrified me, I felt a strange sense of calm. I walked into the diner and slid into a booth by the window. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, came over to take my order. I was not hungry, not even close, but I asked for a coffee, something to hold in my hands while my mind raced. As I sat there, sipping the bitter coffee, I thought about the future. What was next? Divorce? Definitely. There was no coming back from this, and I had to face that. But what did that mean for me? I was not the kind of guy who just walked away from commitments. I had put everything I had into my marriage, and now that it was done, I felt lost, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an uncertain future. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized something important. Yes, my life was about to change. Yes, I was about to go through one of the hardest things I would ever face. But I was still standing. Jenny's betrayal had knocked me down, sure, but it hadn't broken me. I was still here. I was still me, and I was going to be okay. I thought about all the people in my life who would support me through this. My friends, my family, they would have my back, no matter what, and that gave me strength. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, who would help me pick up the pieces and start over. Maybe I hadn't realized it until now, but I had a whole new life waiting for me on the other side of this mess. I stared out the window, watching as the sun slowly began to rise over the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the empty streets. It felt symbolic somehow, like this was the beginning of something new, the start of a new chapter. A chapter where I wasn't weighed down by the constant effort of trying to save a marriage that had been dead for years. A chapter where I could focus on myself, my own happiness, instead of chasing after someone who didn't appreciate what we had. The waitress came by to refill my coffee, and for the first time all night, I smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small one, but it felt real, genuine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was going to be okay. I sat there for a while longer, finishing my coffee as the world outside slowly came to life. I didn't know exactly what was next for me, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. I was ready to let go. When I finally got up to leave, the waitress smiled at me and said, "Take care of yourself, hon." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I actually could. As I walked out of the diner and into the cool morning air, I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was not going to be easy, but I was ready for whatever came next, because I knew, no matter what, I would be just fine. Bye.